The rain had started just before midnight, tapping against the windows of the presidential palace in Ouagadougou. Inside, Captain Ibrahim Traoré sat alone in his office, his eyes fixed on a confidential report that had arrived on his desk 2 hours earlier. It was a dossier that accused one man, General Kaboré, his trusted military chief and once his father's loyal friend. Traoré leaned back in his chair, the whispers of the storm outside echoing his own brewing doubts. Kaboré had been with him since the coup, a symbol of continuity for soldiers who needed an older hand to steady the ranks. But the intelligence was clear. Weapons were being rerouted, soldiers were being bribed, and tonight a meeting would be held in secret. A plan to remove Traoré, quietly, bloodlessly, before dawn. The young president knew what betrayal felt like, but this was different. This was family turning the knife. He pushed the file aside, stood up, and adjusted his uniform jacket. Outside his door, his aide Marie knocked softly. "Mr. President, your security team is ready. What are your orders?" Traoré didn't hesitate. "Call Colonel Samaké, tell him to secure the barracks, no one moves without my word. And find Kaboré, bring him to me alive." Marie nodded, her face pale. Everyone trusted Kaboré. Everyone except the man who could see the pattern behind the smiles. As she left, Traoré closed his eyes, listening to the rain intensify. He whispered to himself, "Before dawn, it ends." The corridors of the palace echoed with hurried footsteps as Colonel Samaké led a squad of loyal soldiers through the East Wing. Every guard they passed stiffened, confused by the sudden midnight mobilization. Rumors spread like wildfire. The president had locked himself in, Kaboré had vanished, and something unspeakable was about to unfold. Meanwhile, Ibrahim Traoré stood by the tall window of his office, staring into the rain-soaked courtyard. Lightning split the sky, revealing a convoy of armored trucks quietly positioning themselves near the barracks. He knew Kaboré would sense the trap soon. There would be no chance for explanations then, only blood. Behind him, Marie returned, her voice tense. "Colonel Samaké has secured the armory, sir. We have control of the communication lines. No one can call out." Traoré turned, eyes hard but steady. "And Kaboré?" Marie hesitated. "He was last seen at the officers' club, but he didn't come alone. Reports say he's surrounded by 20 of his personal guards." Traoré almost laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Of course, the old lion would never come quietly. He moved to his desk, opened a hidden drawer, and pulled out his father's old sidearm. A relic from the revolution days, the symbol of power he once swore he'd never have to use. "Tell Samaké," Traoré said, voice low but sharp, "we do this my way. No public firefight. If Kaboré spills blood in this palace, we lose more than a general. We lose the trust of every soldier watching." Marie nodded, understanding the gravity. Outside, the first faint thunder of boots closing in on the officers' club broke the night's fragile calm. Tonight, Ibrahim Traoré would not just survive a betrayal, he would face it eye to eye. In the humid darkness of the officers' club, General Kaboré sat at a corner table surrounded by loyal guards. Cigarette smoke curled around him as he laughed with two colonels who owed him everything: promotions, vehicles, fat bank accounts. On the table lay a folded map of Ouagadougou, marked with red circles, checkpoints, weapons depots, escape routes. But beneath the laughter, Kaboré's eyes were cold steel. He knew something was wrong. The palace lights had gone out floor by floor. The encrypted radio frequencies were dead. And the young lion he had underestimated, Traoré, was not as naive as he once believed. A trembling adjutant whispered into Kaboré's ear, "General, scouts say the presidential guards have surrounded the building. We're boxed in." Kaboré exhaled slowly, stubbed out his cigarette, and pushed back his chair. The colonels fell silent, watching the old warrior's mind calculate the odds. "So, Kaboré muttered to himself. The boy wants a hunt. Let him come. He nodded to his bodyguards. Seal the doors. No one leaves alive if they force their way in. If Traoré wants my head, he must take it himself. Outside, Colonel Samake crouched behind a sandbag barricade. Rain dripped from his helmet as he peered through night vision goggles at the faint silhouettes moving inside the club. Over the comms, Traoré's voice crackled through. Colonel, stand by. No gunfire until I say I'm coming in. Samake's eyes widened. Sir, it's suicide. Let me... Negative. Traoré cut him off. He was once my father's brother in arms. He will hear my voice before he hears my bullets. As the thunder rolled overhead, Traoré stepped alone into the rainy courtyard, the door of the officers' club looming ahead like the maw of a beast waiting to bite. The heavy wooden door of the officers' club creaked open with a groan that cut through the muffled storm outside. Ibrahim Traoré stepped inside, dripping rainwater, his father's old pistol hidden beneath his ceremonial jacket. His eyes locked immediately onto General Kaboré, seated calmly beneath a dim chandelier, a glass of whiskey in hand. The room froze. Dozens of loyalists stared, hands near their sidearms, breath held. It would take one wrong word to turn this tense silence into a massacre. Kaboré broke it first with a slow, mocking clap. Look who comes uninvited in the middle of my private celebration. The young cub who thinks he's king. Traoré didn't move closer yet. His voice, steady but edged with quiet fury, filled the smoke-filled room. Your celebration is over, General. There will be no coup tonight. You forgot the one thing you taught me years ago. Never trust a man who smiles too much. Kaboré's smirk twitched. He stood towering above the table, broad shoulders casting shadows against the cracked wall. And you forgot the other lesson, boy. A general's loyalty is only as deep as his stomach is full. My men are hungry. Your promises are empty. I made sure they eat. Traoré's eyes flicked to the two colonels. Their loyalty wavered under his cold stare. Slowly, deliberately, he stepped closer, boots echoing on the old tile. You betrayed not just me, but every soldier who died believing we would build something clean, together. My father trusted you. You buried him with lies. One of Kaboré's guards shifted, hand hovering near a holster. The room tensed like a coiled snake. Kaboré raised his whiskey, mock-toasting. Tell me, Ibrahim, will you shoot me here? In front of these men who still remember when you wore my boots? Traoré's hand slipped under his coat, fingers curling around cold steel. I won't have to. Outside, Colonel Samake gave the signal. All exits were sealed in an instant. No way out, no reinforcements. The trap Kaboré thought he'd set was now his cage. Tonight, the rain would wash away an old lion's last roar. The tense silence shattered when the front windows exploded inward, not with bullets, but with the force of loyal guards breaching on Colonel Samake's command. Glass rained down over the stunned conspirators. Guns were drawn, but no one fired. Inside that room, it was still Traoré's voice that decided whether men lived or died. General Kaboré didn't flinch. He finished his whiskey in one gulp, then slammed the glass down so hard it cracked in his hand. A thin line of blood dripped from his palm, mixing with the rain dripping through the broken window. He stared at Traoré, defiant to the last breath. You were a boy begging for my protection. Now you stand here pretending to be a man who commands the wind and rain. You are nothing without me. Traoré stepped even closer, now face to face, so near he could see every scar time had carved into Kaboré's weathered skin. His voice dropped to a whisper meant only for the general's ears. Tonight, you remind every soldier watching that old power rots faster than young courage. Behind them, Samake barked orders. Traitors were disarmed, forced to their knees. One colonel broke immediately, begging for mercy. Another spat at the floor in shame, but Kaboré didn't kneel. He reached slowly for the ceremonial dagger at his belt an ancient blade he had carried since his first campaign. Every man in the room tensed, but Traoré lifted a single hand to stop his guards. Kaboré's voice trembled, not with fear, but with the weight of a life that had lost its purpose. "I won battles before your father was born. If I must fall tonight, I fall like a warrior, not a dog." Traoré nodded, eyes unblinking. "Then do it. Spare me from taking your life with my own hands." Kaboré raised the blade to his chest, the rain and sweat mixing on his forehead. For a moment, silence returned, the storm outside and the storm within holding their breath as one. Then, with a final growl, the old lion thrust. Outside, the thunder swallowed the sound of betrayal's price being paid. The moment General Kaboré's body hit the tiled floor, a hush fell over the officers' club. The old general's loyalists lowered their weapons without a word. Whatever defiance had flickered in their eyes was gone now, snuffed out by the finality of their leader's choice. Traoré stood still, looking down at the man who had once lifted him onto war horses as a child, who had sworn oaths beside his father under the burning Sahel sun. The betrayal still burned, but it was the pity in his chest that stung more. Colonel Samake moved forward, whispering urgently, "Mr. President, we have secured the entire block. There are no more traitors left standing. Orders?" Traoré tore his eyes from Kaboré's lifeless face and glanced around the room. The soldiers who remained, young corporals, older sergeants, men who had followed Kaboré for decades, now looked at him alone for direction. Some trembled, afraid they'd be next. Others looked relieved, freed from the shadow of an aging tyrant. He cleared his throat, his voice cutting through the wet, smoky air. "Tonight, you have a choice. You can bury your loyalty with this man, or stand up, walk outside, and serve your country as true soldiers of the people." A few men hesitated, then dropped their guns to the floor, hands raised. One by one, the spell of the betrayal broke like chains snapping under sudden freedom. Outside, the rain softened into a gentle drizzle. It washed the blood from the palace steps and the sins from the hearts of those willing to repent. Traoré turned to Samake, eyes hardening again. "Round up every conspirator still breathing. No executions? Not tonight? They will face the people's justice at dawn." Samake nodded and saluted sharply. "Yes, sir." As the colonel barked fresh orders and the loyalists moved prisoners into waiting trucks, Traoré stepped out into the rain alone, letting it soak him clean. Above him, the clouds parted just enough for the first stars to blink awake over a city that almost lost itself to an old man's ambition. He whispered to the night, "Betray me if you must, but betray my country and you won't live to boast about it." The convoy of armored trucks rolled through the narrow streets of Ouagadougou under the watchful eyes of loyalists perched on rooftops. Inside the lead vehicle, Traoré sat in silence, rain dripping from his hair onto the file of names spread across his lap. The surviving traitors, the financiers, the foreign contacts who had whispered poison into Kaboré's ear. Colonel Samake rode opposite him, rifling through an encrypted tablet. "Sir, the interrogations confirm it. Foreign money, foreign weapons, and rumors that the old general promised them access to our gold reserves." Traoré's jaw tightened. "The old games. Sell your people to feed your own greed. This is why Africa bleeds in circles." The colonel hesitated before asking the question weighing on every loyal officer's mind. "What now, Mr. President? Kaboré is gone, but the foreign hands behind him are still out there. They won't forgive what you did tonight." Traoré looked out the rain-slicked window. Market stalls glowed with lantern light despite the hour. Mothers carried sleeping children through muddy alleys. Young men with nothing in their pockets but hope watched the convoy pass, wondering if their futures would be different now. "We show them," Traoré said softly, more to himself than to Samake. "We show every old man in a suit in Paris or Washington or Moscow that this land is not for sale, not anymore." He leaned forward, tapping the file with a finger. Make these trials public. Broadcast every confession, every truth. Let the people see who feeds them lies while stealing their gold. Samake's eyes widened. Some will call it dangerous, sir. Too much truth can burn. Traoré's mouth twitched, half a smile, half a warning. Then let it burn. Better a fire now than chains forever. As the convoy crossed the river bridge, the lights of the city shimmered like the first promise of a dawn that would belong, finally, to its rightful children. By dawn, the city was humming with a restless energy. Rumors of General Kaboré's fall spread faster than the sun could rise. Some wept for the old lion, others cheered that the predator who fed on the country's veins was finally gone. At the central square, makeshift wooden platforms were erected overnight. It was here that the traitors, blindfolded and bound at the wrists, were brought before the people they had sworn to protect, and sold instead for silver and promises. Traoré arrived quietly, no fanfare, no armored guards pressing the crowd back. He walked through the people, feeling their eyes on him, hope, suspicion, fear, pride, all tangled into one raw heartbeat. An old woman caught his arm as he passed. Her hands were cracked with decades of carrying firewood and grief. "Mr. President, don't let them steal our sons anymore." He squeezed her hand gently. "Never again, Mother." On the platform, Colonel Samake read the charges, voice ringing out into the morning mist. Conspiracy, corruption, treason against the people's sovereignty. Some traitors wept, others stared defiantly into the crowd, still clinging to their pride like a drowning man clutching a stone. Traoré stepped forward. He did not shout. He didn't need to. His words fell into the hush like hammers into iron. "We will not be ruled by cowards who beg for foreign gold. We will not be fed scraps while our soil is sold piece by piece. And we will not fear truth, no matter how sharp its edge." He raised his hand, and silence swept the square. These men will face judgment not behind palace walls, but here, in the daylight, before the mothers who lost sons and the farmers who lost land. A cheer rose, raw, hungry, unstoppable. Today, the people would watch betrayal pay its due. As the sun climbed higher, the square turned into a living courtroom. Witnesses, soldiers, farmers, old government clerks, came forward one by one to tell what they had seen. Secret shipments of weapons hidden in grain trucks, suitcases of foreign cash passed beneath the flicker of oil lamps, meetings held in dusty basements where Kaboré's men plotted in hushed tones. The people listened. They asked questions. They shouted when lies were spoken and applauded when truths cut through the fog like a blade. General Kaboré's remaining loyalists, bound and bruised, tried to protest. One, a young captain with tears streaming down his face, broke down and begged for mercy. Another spat curses at Traoré, swearing his death would come by the hands of foreign powers soon enough. Traoré stood unmoved, a living statue of iron and storm. Beside him, Samake watched the crowd with an eagle's eyes, ready for any spark of fresh betrayal. Finally, when the last witness stepped down, Traoré climbed the platform alone. He looked at the traitors kneeling before him, then at the thousands pressing in from every street around the square. Market sellers, old widows, schoolboys in torn uniforms, they were all here holding their breath for what he would say next. "Some of you wonder why we do not drag these men to the edge of the city and bury them in secret graves," he said, voice deep as distant thunder. "It would be easy. It would be quick, but it would not be justice." He pointed to the people, to the mud on their feet and the sun on their faces. "You are the power here. You decide what happens to those who betray you, not I, not the generals, not the old men across the sea." A roar answered him, part rage, part relief, part the first taste of a freedom they had never truly known. The trials were over. The verdict belonged to Burkina Faso. As dusk painted the sky in shades of burnt orange and deep violet, the square that had once trembled under fear now pulsed with the heartbeat of a nation awake. The people's verdict echoed across loudspeakers, carried down every alley and into every ear. The traitors would live, but they would serve the very communities they had stolen from, rebuilding schools, planting fields, restoring what they had betrayed. No quick death, a lifetime to repay a debt measured in broken trust. Some foreign diplomats whispered that Traoré's justice was naive, too merciful for a continent stained by coups and endless blood feuds. But within Burkina Faso, the decision set fire to something bigger than vengeance. It rekindled ownership, a rare and holy thing in a land so long stripped by outsiders and insiders alike. Traoré stood on the same wooden platform as the stars blinked open above him. His voice carried softer now, yet it held a promise as unbreakable as iron. From this day, no general, no president, no foreign master will decide your destiny without your consent. You are the guardians of this soil. You are the shield against betrayal. He stepped down into the crowd, letting hands touch his shoulders, children reach for his palms. He was no king, no god, just a man who had faced knives in the dark and walked through fire so his people could stand taller than the chains left behind by history. In the distance, drums began to beat, not for war, but for a future worth the struggle. And above it all, in the hush before the drums rose into song, one old woman's voice whispered the truth that would outlive every tyrant and traitor. He is ours now, and this land is ours again. Tonight you've seen how betrayal grows in the shadows, and how courage hunts it down in the light. Ibrahim Traoré showed us that true leadership is not about power alone. It's about standing face to face with treason and saying, "Not on my land, not in my people's name." Let this story remind us all, no force, no general, no foreign plan can break a nation united by truth and justice. If you believe more stories like this must be told, the hidden struggles, the real heroes, then join us. Subscribe, share, and stay awake, because the untold state is the strongest state of all. Thank you for watching. Stay brave, stay free, and see you in the next story.